Welcome back. Here we go with part 2 of optimizing foot placement for better balance and support while standing. Something that's going to allow you to sense your feet better when you're standing. Actually, stand up for a moment. Okay, once you are in standing, just take a moment to feel the ground beneath you. Feel the texture of the floor that you are standing with and feel the temperature. Get yourself into the mood of sensing, of paying attention to your senses. And notice, where are you carrying most of your body weight? Do you feel more pressure in the heels of your feet? In the outer edges or the inner edges? Your toes, in the balls of your feet. So if you're not sure, that's okay. Time to place our feet with the wall again. Remember, you could just have your feet on the floor, laying with your back to the floor and knees bent. Do what's best for you. Lay with your back to the floor, your feet up against a wall or your feet flat on the floor and your knees bent. If your feet are on the wall, you're going to have your knees bent at about a 90-degree angle. So just a recap of what we were playing with in the previous video, we were playing with applying pressure to the feet in a way that sent force upwards, a sensation that would mimic you pushing yourself away from the wall, but you're doing it not to actually push yourself away from the wall, but rather to just feel how force is transmitted through your body up to your head. So take a couple of moments to revisit that, applying a subtle amount of pressure through your feet in a way that gives you a slight push upwards. You're looking for something that allows you to feel like the movement travels through you in an equally distributed way. So that means you don't feel like you're pressing your lower back to the floor. You shouldn't feel your tailbone curving up. One example of what we don't want to do is take a really big push and feel that we're pushing parts of our back heavily against the floor. It should be much lighter than that. It should be a push through your feet that keeps your spinal column within its natural curvature as you move yourself upwards. When you're doing it well, you'll even be able to notice a little bit of a grip coming from the skin of your arms and your fingertips. You'll notice that your shoulders are moving slightly away from your ears as your head is moving upwards. Now that you've taken a few moments to explore that, go ahead and straighten your legs up the wall for a moment and just rest. It's easy for our leg muscles to get tired when we have them propped up against the wall. So please make sure to rest even sooner if you're finding you get tired before I cue the rest. So bringing your feet flat with the surface again, knees bent. One foot, whichever foot you would like, you're going to lift the forefoot away from the wall and you're going to lightly push through the heel of your foot. You're going to keep the forefoot slightly lifted from the surface. Reposition your heel to a different place and push upwards. Try this in several locations. So every time you place your heel with the surface, you're not only going to push so that your body gets moved slightly upwards, you're going to position the heel somewhere different. And now find the position that allows you to feel the most power. And I'm not saying for you to push more. What I mean by power is the one that you feel motion go through your body with the most ease, the least effort necessary. And again, take a rest, straighten your legs up the wall. This is a wonderful lesson for circulation. So if you've been on your feet all day, it's nice to have your legs elevated like this. A little bonus. Okay, place the feet with the surface. Now this time what you're going to do is you're going to lift your heel from the surface, but you're going to keep the ball of your foot connected to the surface. And we're going to do the same thing. You're just going to lift your foot from the surface, place it down somewhere different, and take a little push. Really focusing on those bones that you were exploring and trying to sense those bones coming into contact with the surface as you start to push yourself a little bit upwards. And as you do this, think about what you're doing. You're doing this in a manner that allows you to move yourself away from your foot, essentially. You're not pressing your foot into the surface that it's touching. Instead, you're finding support from the foot in which you are able to move in an upward direction. Remember, up is towards your head, even when you're laying like this. Think about how that can support you in standing. Oftentimes we think about grounding our feet to the floor, but that actually starts to create a heaviness, a push into the surface. Instead, you can think of it as your feet are a base that are able to maintain a structural integrity to which you can stack yourself tall above. All right, so now that you've explored that a few times, again, take a rest. You can straighten your legs up the wall. You're also welcome to just roll to lay on one side if you need that. But here in this moment of rest, have your eyes closed and notice, can you feel a difference from one foot to the other foot? Your feet flat with the surface again. And can you feel that foot that you were exploring differently compared to the other foot? In fact, push just through the foot that you were exploring and let that go, and then push through the foot that you haven't explored yet. Do you notice a difference? Do you notice that one is easier than the other? Interesting, huh? Or maybe that was a big fat no. Who knows? Remember, it takes practice. And if I can feel the difference, eventually you will be able to. So roll to your side for this next rest. Let's take a moment to not have the feet propped up against anything. Just a moment of stillness, feeling your breath. Okay, back with the floor again. Now you'll keep the ball of your foot and the heel of your foot connected with the surface, but you'll lift the toes away from the surface. As you do this several times, notice that the ball of your foot engages more with the surface as you do this. So there's two ways that we could initiate this. We could think that we are using the muscles at the top of our foot and trying to pull the toes up from the wall as high as possible. Or we can try to find a source that gives us leverage to just seesaw the toes away from the floor. This time, before you begin the movement, bring your attention to the ball of your foot first. And you're going to think about the ball of your foot coming closer to the surface that it's touching. And as it does, your toes can slightly lift away from the surface. So you are pushing something towards the surface so that another part of it can come away from the surface, rather than trying to muscle your way into a toe lift. The less you do, the more clearer this is going to become. The idea is that you start to give yourself a clearer sense of how you can move the joints of the ball of your feet for adequate support of your toes and the rest of you. Okay, now that you've played with that a few times, why don't you take a moment, straighten your legs up the wall. So now let's really find an idea of a seesaw within our metatarsals, within our feet, within our toes. Place your feet flat with the surface again, whether that be the wall or the floor. And this time, instead of lifting the tips of the toes away from the surface, could you keep the tips of the toes and the heel of your foot connected to the surface and lift just the ball of your foot? Now it's going to be very tempting to want to grip with your toes, but I want you to try to do a very small motion so that you feel like your toes don't have to grip or clench as you lift the ball of the foot away from the surface. Remember, less is more. So if you find that you're clenching your toes, you might be coming from that habit of muscular effort, of just trying to muscle your way through it. Instead, you can pause for a moment and just feel the tip pads of your toes touching the surface. And think about the pads of your toes, the very tips of them, not the ball of the foot, coming more into contact with the surface. And that contact allows you to lever the ball of your foot slightly away from the wall or the floor, in combination with the heel, right? So you'll feel now the heel of your foot is more connected to the surface, and the very tip pads of the toes are connected to the surface, and the ball of the foot is now able to just rainbow away from the wall. Okay, give it a rest. You can do straight legs, you can roll to your side, whatever you prefer. All right, let's wrap this up. So your feet connected with the surface. Now you're going to alternate that motion that you were doing. Keep the heel in your awareness. So your heel has a big part to play in the movement of your toes. One time, engage the ball of your foot with the surface so the toes can slightly come away from the surface. I should say actually engage the ball of your foot and the heel of your foot with the surface so that your toes can lift. And then place the pads of your toes back onto the surface and use the pads of your toes and the heel of your foot to lift the ball of your foot slightly away. I know that's a mouthful. I'm going to repeat it a couple of times. So the heel of your foot and the ball of your foot will stay connected to the surface as you lift your toes away from the surface. Then you're going to use the heel of your foot and the pads of your toes to lift the ball of your foot away from the surface. And you're going to alternate. One time lifting the toes, one time lifting the ball of your foot. Go slow. Don't rush this. Remember, you're not doing the movement just for the sake of doing the movement. You're trying to learn better control of yourself. And learning better control of your feet can sometimes be the hardest thing to do because it's not something we think about that often. All right, let's roll to the side and leave that all alone. So you just take a few moments on your side. Again, just checking in with yourself, noticing if you can feel something different from the foot that you were playing with. And bring yourself to laying with your back to the floor again. And when you place your feet onto the surface, just feel the difference. Do you have a clarity coming more from one foot compared to the other? Push through the foot that you were exploring and notice how that movement travels up through you to the top of your head. And then let that push go and push through the other foot. Can you feel the difference? Again, push through the foot that you played with throughout the video. Notice if there's a smoothness as your movement travels upwards. And then do your other foot. Okay, roll it over. And slowly bring yourself to seated. Once you've come to seated, go ahead and then bring yourself to standing so that you can sense the way you are supporting yourself from your feet. Can you feel a difference between the way you find support from the foot you played with and the foot you didn't play with? Try shifting your weight to the leg that you were not exploring. and then shift your weight to the leg that you were exploring. Which foot can you feel more structural integrity from? So what I mean by that is, which foot maintains its form and shape? Which foot feels heavier and pressed into the floor? Or perhaps one foot, maybe the foot that you played with, doesn't even feel pressed into the floor, but feels as though it's holding form and support. Remember to rewind the video and do this on your other foot so that you can feel the same sense through both. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. And as always, here's to a happy, healthier way of life. Bye.